I wouldn't expect it to be. Yeah, you're right. The other room doesn't have it, so it's not required about that.
I might honestly, because it's such a small room.
You want to turn down the house?
Yeah, that's fine. I think I can talk about that.
I'll take one out. Okay? Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
thank you.
not fun.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
You just want to look around and go to the other room?
Hey guys, hey, I'm Cosplay. I am the one who's going to be doing this panel today. If I talk like this, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. I was having issues with the mic, and I'm going to be using both of my hands for most of this presentation, so if I can just talk loud, I think that's better than just holding a mic and trying to cut foam and, try not to cut my finger off that way. So, welcome. Thanks for coming. Again, my name is Hash Brown Cosplay. I go by Ashley, Ash, whatever you want to call me. And today I'm going to be showing you how to turn something like this, EVA Foam, into something like this. So with foam, the cool thing about it is that you can make whatever you set your mind to, and with enough practice and experience, you can make full armor sets. It's a great resource for cosplaying. It's light, it's not very breathable, but it's super easy to work with once you get the hang of it. I like to tell people, so when I started cosplaying back in 2016, I think was the first time I tried to use EVA foam, and I hated it so much I quit for a year. I was like, I'm done, I hate this is bullshit, I don't like it. So yeah, and now I've won a couple of Momocon costume contests in my division with my foam work, so you just, if at first you don't succeed, keep trying. So yeah, we'll go ahead and get started.
He's got wireless.
Oh, perfect. So he's got a wireless headset for me, but while we're waiting on that, I'll go ahead and kind of show you the basics. So what we're going to make today is a bracer, just something that fits over your hands, and I'm going to, at the end of the panel, kind of dress this up with paint. And this is something you could wear to like a Ren fair, if you want to do like a fantasy character. you can, kind of dress it up how you want. Your imagination is kind of the limit. So yeah, with the bracer, the first thing you're gonna need is a pattern, your own pattern, because everybody's arms are different sizes, right? So the easiest way to make your own pattern is gonna be using painter's tape and either cling wrap and aluminum foil. So what you can do with that is take the foil, wrap it around your arm, and then take the painter's tape and wrap it on top of that. So once you have that, it should look something like this, all around your arm. You would take a Sharpie or a pen or whatever you have and cut it about halfway. And then once you take it off, you should have this. And when you lay it flat, it turns into the pattern. So that's what you're going to be using as your base. So what I like to do after I make my pattern out of the painter's tape and the foil is go ahead and trace it onto paper to get a definitive pattern. Because this is it's janky. Like, I don't want to make something out of this and trace it directly onto foam because it's not going to match up right. So when I trace it onto paper, I can modify the pattern as I need. And it looks something like this. So my pattern, I want my bracer to be pointed up here and lower here. So once you trace that onto paper with a pencil or a pen or whatever you have, you're going to have something like this. Now you can see the lines are kind of uneven, so you can take a ruler and just straighten out those lines.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. I think you can go by these.
So you kind of have a straighter pattern to work with. And you want your lines to be straight. You don't want the lines to kind of come in and out like that, because when you glue it, you want a straight line, something to work with. So, yeah, give me just something, guys.
2 sharp strips under.
Yep.
Yeah, a bit like that.
Perfect.
I'll try. Hang it on later. Just hang it on later.
Gotcha. Okay.
No. Straight.
Yep. I'm just going to keep talking, so.
Nothing?
I don't think so. Yeah. Okay, so we'll just continue. So with the bracer pattern, modifying your pattern is going to be the hardest part. So you kind of just have to practice. Like for this pattern here, it took me, I've been doing this for years, and it took me like 4 times to get this how I wanted it. I know that I want the bracer to be pointed at the end. So what you're going to do is just draw a high point. Oh, by the way, I'm streaming live on Instagram. If you guys want to see what I'm doing on the table, it should be displayed pretty well on Instagram. It's #Cosplay. I don't have a camera and nothing to project here for you. Sorry about that.
You have 3?
So with the bracer, I know I want a point, and I know I want it to be lower on the sides. So I'm just kind of going to trace a rough pattern. And it should look something like that, right? So higher here, and then lower there. And with patterns and EVA foam, the same thing. I don't know if you've ever used a pattern for sewing or anything of that sort, but you're going to want to add a seam allowance to it. So usually I do about a 1/4 inch on my patterns. I will just trace here, so at the end of the pattern, because this is the middle and this is the end, and they're going to connect here and here. I like to put the seam allowance here and then just draw a line straight down there. So about a 1/4 inch. That is going to ensure that your bracer is not too small for your arm, because if you take your pattern directly from the painter's tape and the saran wrap or foam or foil, and you flatten it out and you trace that directly onto foam, the foam is going to be too small because there's no seam allowance. Foam is thick, so when it wraps, it's not going to wrap the same way paper does. You know, paper is flat, it's thin. But with foam, you're going to have to add a seam allowance, so that way it fits around you pretty snug. Yeah, so once you've got your pattern, I like to label mine just so I don't get confused with them. And I like to add these little registration marks. So to make the pattern, you're going to need to trace it onto the foam, like so, and then flip it, right? And you're going to be connecting the two patterns, or the two pieces together. So to line them up and make sure that your pattern fits well together, the registration marks are super helpful. I like to put, you know, maybe 4 on each side, and then just trace them into the foam. So that would look something like this. So you would take it and trace it like so with a silver Sharpie. That's going to be most helpful on black foam. Nothing else really shows up on black foam. I like to use silver Sharpie. But for, you know, gray foam or white foam, black Sharpie or a pen is fine. So you take your pattern and then just trace it with a Sharpie. And with the registration marks, they are in there ready to go. And then you would just take your pattern, flip it, and then trace it onto the foam as well. So I'm going to be doing that really quickly because next we're going to be cutting out the foam, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. And as always with your pattern, just make sure it's laid out flat. You can always use something to weigh it down to make sure it's flat. You know, like whatever you have available, just something heavy. Oh, you're excited. I wish I was that excited. I'm kind of like Bob Ross over here, you know? it's giving Bob Ross. Okay, so once you have both of them traced onto the foam, it should be opposite. So it's going to be mirrored like that. And now you're ready to cut it out. So to cut out foam, you're going to need a knife like this. You can buy these at any hardware store, Home Depot, Harbor Freight. I'm pretty sure I got this from Harbor Freight, and a really sharp blade. So these are extendable, I think box cutters is what they call them, or utility knives. This is your bread and butter for EVA foam making. You're going to want to make sure that you always have a sharp knife in here. So you can buy just a pack of blades like this. I got these from, I think these were from Harbor Freight. They're really cheap. It's not something that you're going to be spending a whole lot of money on. You can also invest in a blade sharpener to sharpen your blades before you start cutting into EVA foam. Because it kind of goes against like the grain of thinking, but blades dull really easy on EVA foam. So you might, you know, trace out a few patterns, and then next thing you know, your blade isn't cutting through foam anymore because it's dull. So you're either going to want to replace your blade at that point or sharpen. And I'll show you how to sharpen it in just a second. Always make sure your blade is sharp before you cut. I just replaced this blade so I know it's good. You're going to want to extend your blade about halfway out like this. You don't want it all the way out like this, and you don't want it like this, because that's not going to cut through foam. You're going to want something just like that, about halfway out. Lock it. And when you cut into foam, you're not going to cut like this or whatever. You're going to take your foam. I wish I had a camera to show you guys, but you're going to take your foam and then just go like this. So starting from the back of the blade, you cut into the foam like so. What I like to do to hold the blade, I'm ambidextrous, so I can use either hand, but the finger on top kind of helps me control the blade and the movement. So just a handy tip. You can also hold it like this and that would be fine, but for some reason I just like to do this. It just feels more comfortable for me. So when you cut, you're going to go in using the back of the blade. And you're going to do a steady, firm cut. You're not going to stop halfway through. And you're not going to go too fast or slow. Just take your time with it. Don't buzz through it, but also don't cut halfway and then pick it up and come back to it, because you're going to get ridges in your foam. When your blade is dull, or if you stop halfway, you're going to get something like this. So I don't know if you guys can see all the way in the back, but that is what a dull blade can do. And if you mess up, it's not the end of the world. You can sand it, but it's just nice to have smooth cuts every time. So, cutting out the pattern. Again, just take your blade, make sure it's about halfway extended, and cut. So, before I begin, I'll show you. This is a curved cut, right? The cool thing about these blades is that they're flexible. They'll move with you. So if you start cutting, just move the blade along the pattern, and as long as you have a firm grip on the knife and you're bearing down, you give it a good amount, it should just cut clean. Yeah, it's pretty easy, just as long as your blade's dull. Now, like I said, if the blade is dull, it's not going to cut all the way through, and that's when you know to sharpen your blade. So we're just going to finish cutting this out real quick. And there you go. So it's nice and smooth. The foam looks pretty good. That's going to be ideal for gluing. Now, say this blade is dull and I would give it a nice sharpen. I'm going to extend the blade out all the way and take my blade sharpener. And I do this. I don't know, I'm probably not the world's best blade sharpener, but I start from the end and go to the top like that. So give that a nice good sharpening a few times. And then switch and do the same thing. Now that might take you a while to learn, because when I first tried it, it just did not work and I got frustrated and I just kept putting new blades in. And then I realized I was spending a decent amount of money on that. So it's gonna be better in the long run to invest in a blade sharpener. You only need to do it a few times. You don't need to spend 10 minutes sharpening your blade. It only takes a few of those to get it sharp again. So we're going to do the second one, again, holding like this. Blade's about halfway extended and it's locked. There you go. The blade is still nice and sharp. You got nice clean cuts. There's no ridges. It only took me once to cut through the foam. We're good to go. Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
Just to, like, I work with blades, but if you sharpen that thing too much, you will damage it.
Oh, okay.
Box cutters can be pretty cheap pressed metal, so
yeah.
You don't want, like it's one of those things, like say, you don't want to over sharpen it, because you'll wind up just ruining it, and then you'll have to replace it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You don't need to spend, like I had said, you don't need to spend 5 minutes sharpening the blade. You really only need to do it a few times just to get it nice and sharp again. Now, if your blade is a little dull and you cut through the foam and you didn't cut all the way through, what do? You just give up and fuck it, I'll go back in a year and do it like I did? No. What you can do is just cut through again. It's fine. It's not going to be this bad. This is really dramatic. It's not the end of the world. You can still glue it. And if you need to, you can sand it. I'll kind of show you the tools that you need to sand your foam here in a minute. But from here, what I like to do is put my blade away. We don't want this out while we're working because you don't want to cut yourself. So always make sure your blade is put away and safe. Because you're going to have a lot going on your table all at once, and you don't want to accidentally tuck this under some foam and then cut your finger, Been there, done that. Not a good time. So from here, what I usually like to do is heat up the foam. So this is important because EVA foam is a really porous material to use. I don't know if you can see it here. You can come up and look at this later whenever you want, by the way. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand and ask. But it's gonna be a porous substance to work with. So once you heat seal it, the next phase we usually call heat sealing. Once you heat seal it, it'll turn shiny, and it'll close up the pores in the surface. That's going to make your paint job look a lot better. So, you can use any heat gun really. I like this one. It's pretty sure I got this off Amazon. Really, any heat gun will do. Turn it on high, and usually you just need to do a few swipes, like so, and then it's ready. You don't need to spend a few minutes heating it up. It really only takes just a few passes of the heat gun. I don't know if you guys have ever blow dried your hair, but a tip that I learned when I was little is to not keep the hair dryer in one place because it'll burn your head, right? You don't want to do this. It's the same thing with EVA foam. You don't want to keep it in one place. It's going to burn the foam, and then you're going to have to, start over because there's really no coming back from that. It's not going to catch fire. Don't worry. Like nothing terrible is going to happen, but it just won't look good, and you're going to want to have to start new. So, with the heat gun, this nozzle gets really hot. So I like to have a heat gun that extends like this, so I can set it down safely, like so, because you don't want this touching your table or what have you, because it's going to burn. It gets really hot. Please try not to touch this. If you don't feel comfortable using just your hands, you can buy, I bought these gloves off Amazon. They're just, fireproof gloves that are used for like throwing logs on campfires. They're heat resistant gloves, use oven mitts, whatever, just until you're comfortable enough. So I'm going to turn this on high, on the highest setting, on the hottest setting, like so. I make sure it's hot first, and then I'm just going to do a few passes on the foam. Now, as you start to pass over the foam, you will notice it gets shiny. Once it's shiny, you don't need to go over that section again. So, make sure to get the sides and the front and back. There we go. Perfect. And also, once it's hot, I like to go ahead and bend the piece, like so. I just take my fingers here and press into it outwards. It's not going to break the foam. This is 6mm foam, I forgot to mention in the beginning. There's different thicknesses of foam. For base pieces, I like to use thicker stuff like 6mm, 8mm, 10mm. I wanted my bracer to be on the thinner side, so I stuck with 6mm because it kind of gives it a nice thin look. It's not too thick, it's not too chunky. But if that's something you want to do for like a World of Warcraft armor, you're definitely going to want to use a different thickness of foam. So, while it's hot, I like to bend the foam, and I don't know if you can see from where you're sitting, but I'm going to have these laid out afterwards. You can come up and look at the difference. There is a difference. So this is kind of flat, and this looks shiny, and once you're done bending it, it should keep its shape for the most part. So you've turned a flat piece into kind of a three-dimensional piece. Now, once you have the other one heated up and ready to go, you can start gluing. So with glue, there's a few different types of adhesives out there, but the best adhesive that I have found and many other cosplayers have found out there to use to adhere foam together is going to be contact cement. So this is weldwood. I'm not going to open it because it's really toxic and I don't want to get you guys high. Okay? Yeah, it's not happening, I promise. You can buy this at Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's. Most of the stuff that you're going to need to work with EVA foam, you're going to be able to find at the hardware store. So it's not like you have to go online and find a specialty store in the UK, wait for all this to ship. You can, most of the stuff you have in your garage, or your dad might have, or you can find at Home Depot. Anyways, so yeah, I'm not going to open this, I'm not going to be using it. However, contact cement is really great. What you do is take out, it has a brush on top of the lid here, or under the lid here. Take it out and kind of lightly paint what you want to glue together. So we want this glued together and this glued together. So what you would do is just paint it on lightly and then wait for it to dry. It's gonna come on and it's gonna be really shiny, and you wanna wait for it to get tacky and kind of dull. It's gonna feel like the back of a Post-it note. I don't know if you know what that feels like, but you can take your finger and kind of just lightly tap, and once it feels like that, go ahead and do another layer. The 2 layers is really good for base pieces because it's gonna ensure that it doesn't break away. Yeah, if you have just 1 layer of contact cement on a base piece, you may get to a con and sweat all day, and it may just decide to, break apart. 2 layers is just going to ensure that it all sticks together. So, once you have your, yeah.
Is that 2 layers on both sides or just one? Okay.
2 layers on both sides, yeah, thank you. It's going to stick together, and then it's not going to come apart. I wish I could show you guys a way to, adhere these together, because it's really important. This is going to make or break whether something looks good to begin with. So I can kind of show you. So once you have the glue and it's ready to go, make sure your registration marks line up. Remember that we put those in the pattern to kind of ensure everything lines up together and looks good. So I usually start from the bottom and then just kind of gently close it in using my thumb to guide, like so. And then, with glue, it'll stay there. It won't, break away like it's doing now. Yeah, and then it should be nice and flat. Now, if it kind of looks like this, like it's a little raised in some places, that's okay. The cool thing about foam is that it's very forgiving. You can sand it down or you can cover it up. Like this bracer. I did the exact same thing that I showed you and then glued it together using contact cement. So you can see right here that it's got some ridges, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's probably not going to be perfect the first time you do it. Lord knows I've been doing this for years and it's still not perfect, so don't stress it. But if you want to, you can always sand it down. You can use some detail pieces to cover it up. That's what I like to do, just cover my sins so no one sees. Yeah, so this is what it's going to look like when it's all glued together. It's a nice piece. Yeah.
So when you try to put it on, is it going to fit over your hand?
Yes, it should.
Okay.
And if it doesn't, you can leave maybe from here down and insert some Velcro into it. So it opens up with Velcro and then closes up. I kind of have smaller hands, so I am just able to kind of fit like so. It kind of gets a little tight trying to get out, but that's okay. And that's why we have the seam allowance, because we want a little bit of play. So, but yeah, if your hand's a little too big or you're having issues, you can always just take this and cut it, and then just insert Velcro, just to make sure your hand is able to get in and out of there. So once you're done with this, it's time to start adding some detail pieces. So depending on whether you're making a cosplay from something where you have a reference, you can kind of sketch out the upper layers and things like that. I find the easiest way to go ahead and start doing layers is to take the original pattern that I made. Look at me losing things left and right. So make a copy of this and on a fresh sheet of paper. So you have 2 copies of your pattern. And then with the new copy that you have, you can kind of start to trace what you want your pattern to look like. I like to do it by, just by eyeing it. If you know that you want it to be a certain length or a certain width, you can take your ruler and compare it against your bracer. And you can say, okay, well, this character has a diamond right here, and it's about the center of the bracer, and it looks like it might be 2 inches long. So you can take that and trace it onto your new pattern. That's what I like to do. I just like to wing it. However, for most mainstream characters, you are able to find patterns online, just prefabricated patterns that you can print out at home, and the pattern's already made for you. So that's super awesome. I always recommend that to beginners. There's a lot of resources out there on YouTube and Instagram, Facebook, people who have already made patterns so that you don't have to. Pattern making is definitely one of the hardest parts of foam smithing, I would say. It can take multiple tries until you get something that you like. So, I know that I wanted some cool looking like diamond pieces on the middle of my bracer. I just looked up like Viking bracers and found a pattern kind of similar to this, and I was like, oh yeah, I think I could make that. So with the detail pieces, usually you don't want them as thick as the base. The base is going to be the thickest part of the armor. So there's, like I was saying earlier, there's different types of foam thickness. This is going to be 4mm. As you can see, it's not very thick, and it's good for big detail pieces like this. You can kind of see it's not as thick as the base of the bracer, but it's still nice and it's going to pop. And then for trims, I usually just like to do 2mm EVA foam. This is craft foam, so I don't know if you were ever in elementary school and used craft foam for like arts and crafts day, but that's what this is. You can buy this pretty much anywhere. So I like to use the really thin stuff for trim, so it looks nice and thin and kind of like it's like made into the bracer. So it took me a few tries to get this pattern that I wanted. And if you can't get your pattern right, just keep trying until you get something that you do like. I was able to take my original pattern and then sketch out a rough idea of what I wanted on the bracer, and then you're good to go. So once you have your patterns made, you can trace it onto the thinner foam. It's usually a good idea to label your patterns just in case you have to leave and come back to it. I know what these are, but if I were going to label them, I would say probably bracer like middle layer and then bracer upper layer. I'm going to be doing 2 layers 4mm foam onto the bracer. So again, you just take your pattern, trace this out onto the foam with your Sharpie or your pen. I usually like to put, I don't know if you can see them here, a line in the middle of the bracer. So as I'm tracing, you can either follow this line all the way or just do a little line so that when you mirror it, you know where to do it so it's not uneven. So once you have your patterns in, we're just gonna cut these out. Yeah.
Is it better to make a pattern that's a half and then mirror it? Or
Yeah.
is it better to, okay.
Yeah, I like to do that personally. I find that it's a little harder to get a perfect other half because if I try to make, say I'm making a diamond, right? Just a 4-sided diamond. It's not going to be, usually it's not going to be exactly perfect. So I like to cut out 1/2 of it and then mirror it so I know the dimensions are exactly the same so it doesn't look lopsided or anything like that. That's just a personal preference, but I do find that that's easiest. So again, we're just going to be cutting some foam. I will show you guys, you can actually do really complex cuts onto foam. Just kind of take your hand where you want the blade to go, and you can make cool swirly patterns. Like, just kind of play with foam. Foam is cheap, it's really not that expensive. It's a lot cheaper than Warbla or any kind of thermoplastic. So you can just kind of play and see what you can do with your blade. If you wanted to do a beveled cut, you just take your blade, and you know we're cutting straight down like this. You can take it and angle it, and then cut like this. So, if I wanted to do that, I just take it and keep it the exact same the whole way. So again, taking the blade, pointing it this way to get the angled cut, and then just following that the whole way down. If you need it to be a straight cut, you can take a metal ruler. I like to use metal instead of wood. I've tried to use this on a wood ruler and it just kind of splinters it, so it's not the best. But you can take it, angle it, and then just cut all the way down, keeping your hand steady, and then you have an angled cut. So that's cool. Just a nice little trick to keep in mind for if you need to do some sort of angled cut. Okay. So these are, it's gonna be, again, a curved pattern. If your blade, if you cut it and you find that your blade, maybe this is thin enough so it's not gonna do it too bad, but if you find that it kind of warps the foam a little bit, that's okay. You can always sand it later with a Dremel or a rotary tool or sanding sticks. It's kind of hard for a blade to do an extremely curved cut like that. Oh, also, you can use scissors. I might get kicked out of the foam smithing club for this and banned for life.
I use scissors too.
Yeah, I use scissors. So I use utility scissors. They're heavy duty. They're not your regular like paper cutting scissors. I've had these for years and they are the best. You can use scissors for really complex curved cuts. I use them to cut like circles all the time. Just take it and do that. The only thing is, when you run out of blade on the scissor and you have to do this, it's gonna make a mark in the foam. So either you can sand that out, or if it's not too bad, you can just usually glue the pieces together and it's not gonna do anything terrible. So, I mean, scissors, if you've ever cut paper before, it's pretty much the same thing. You are just going to follow your line, and there you go. Now, with scissors, I mean, I like to use it on really thin foam. It's not gonna cut great on really thick foam, but 4 millimeter, 2 millimeter, 1 millimeter, it's gonna do fine. I usually like to use scissors for trim pieces. And there you go. It's not gonna look as clean cut as a blade, but I mean, blades aren't gonna do a great job of cutting curves anyway. It's not gonna be a nice smooth cut every time. So, I mean, pick your poison. So, yeah, so you're just gonna continue cutting out your patterns. And for trim, what goes around the edges of the bracers, a really easy trick for trim is first figuring out how thick you want the trim to be. I think I did about, I don't know, a ½ inch on this. I took another copy of the original pattern, traced it onto paper, and I knew I wanted my upper trim here, and I wanted it to be about ½ inch thick. So a whole easy tip for that is to take your ruler and from the line, measure out ½ inch, just a few times on the bracer. So maybe ½ inch here, ½ inch here, ½ inch here, ½ inch here, and then connect those lines. So it's ½ inch all the way around. It's a nice even trim layer, like this. It doesn't look like it's really thin up here and really thick down here. It's nice and even because that's just a little tip that I use to make sure that it's evened out. So yeah, you would just follow the same process for your trim pieces, which you have it cut out, and it looks decent. You can take your heat gun, heat it up, bend it a little bit if you want to. I would bend these just ever so slightly because it is curved on the bracer. It's usually best not to leave pieces flat. So while it's hot, you would just take it, kind of roll it around, press it out like so, and then you're good to go. I don't think I have the trim pattern that I could show you, but I did the same thing pretty much. I traced it on the EVA foam and then cut it out. I used a blade for this. Usually I use scissors, but I just decided to use my blade this time. And then from there, you can just adhere it onto your bracer. For little details like trim or like these, you're going to be fine using hot glue to adhere them because hot glue it's going to keep it on there and it's not an integral piece of the bracer. So you usually won't have any issues with it falling off or anything like that. If you tried to use hot glue on this, your seams would be like big and open and kind of gross looking. So I don't recommend it. But hot glue works fine. Super glue also works really well too. So pretty much any sort of super glue that you can find at a hardware store, Walmart, whatever. I like to use Bob Smith Industries super glue. And then when I'm ready to glue it onto the bracer, you can just take the super glue and just kind of like do this onto the pattern or onto the foam. And you usually have a few seconds of work time before it gets hard and you can't move the piece around anymore. So I'll show you guys as I do it. Just kind of take it and line it up using your fingers. And you're good to go. And once the super glue dries, it should just stay in place pretty well. I kind of go light-handed on the super glue. I don't go too heavy-handed because if you use a big blob of super glue, it's kind of run out from under you, and then you kind of can't get rid of that. It's gonna look weird once you paint it. So you can just continue on. I usually don't do the whole piece at once because super glue, like I said, it dries quickly. So I just kind of dab the super glue as I go. And then you're good. You just continue that all the way down until it's nice and on. And if you find that there's too much, you can just use scissors and kind of cut off. Like I know I want it to stop here on either side, so just trim off what you don't need. Or if there's not enough, you can always add on. Say it comes short like this, you can just take a half inch thick foam piece and then just kind of put it in the middle, and it's fine. And you can cover it up with quick seal. So with super glue, like I said, or not super glue, hot glue, I like to use it for pieces like this because it's easy. Did you have a question?
I sewed two. I was wondering why you had two pieces for the bracer instead of one.
Oh, one is okay to use, but I find that it kind of doesn't bend as I would like it to. This is going to give it a nice bend kind of in the middle. You could do one piece, but it may not kind of line up how you want and fit your arm perfectly. But yeah, I usually do two pieces of everything I make and kind of mirror it and then glue it together just to give it a nice even look. So like I was saying earlier with the mirroring the pattern, I usually like to use two pieces instead of just one big piece because I can ensure that it's the exact same measurement. Because if you trace out one big piece of your arm, it may be a little bigger on this side and a little shorter on this side, and then it may not work out. But I would say honestly, just do whatever works best for you. Everybody kind of does stuff a different way. If one of my friends down in the Cosplay Alley was presenting this panel, they may show you how to do things a little differently because, this is pretty much an art form. And with any artist, everybody's going to find their own way to do things and what's most comfortable for them. So I definitely recommend playing with it for a while and then just finding what works for you. And it doesn't have, there's no right or wrong way to do things. There's really just the way that's, you're going to feel most comfortable with. Okay, so, oh, look, I broke my rule. I had my blade out. Shame on me. Okay, so once I'm ready to put my patterns and start stacking them, I can start using my hot glue gun. However, to make sure I have it exactly where I want it when I'm ready to hot glue, I like to trace with Sharpie exactly where I want it first. So that way I'm not just guessing when I go to glue it. So just kind of roughly outline where you want it to be. And if you're actually going to use contact cement, I would definitely recommend doing this. Because with contact cement, you have to have the glue exactly where it needs to be so everything lines up well. So say I were to use contact cement, I know to put the contact cement here. and I'm going to put it on the back of this piece. And then it'll just stick together. But with hot glue, I like to put it on the piece that I'm gluing down, not on the piece it's being glued down to. Usually I kind of go all over. I don't go too heavy-handed on the ends because, again, like the super glue, if you go too heavy-handed, once you pin it down, it'll kind of start to like ooze out, and that's not a good look. So I kind of go around the edges and then in the middle. And if it's too big of a piece, I don't think my hot glue gun is working, guys.
Is it on?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hot. I don't know if it's locked. I think it might be jammed. That happens sometimes.
Yeah, the one thing you don't want
Maybe I should call IT.
I think the one thing you don't want to do is like this. There's this one particular part of the instruction where it says never leave your glue stick inside the gun. You're supposed to pull it. You need to pull it out before it actually
Look at me
goes
learning
down.
something new. I don't know if you heard him, but he said try not to leave the glue stick inside the hot glue gun, but thank you. I didn't know that. So maybe that's why it messed up on me.
I think you're okay.
It could just be nervous around crowds too. Performance issues.
Performance anxiety.
Okay.
A little bit. It should be good.
This is my husband Jack. He's the best. Oh, also, if you're gonna start cosplaying, the best advice I can give you is to find someone that you can trick into being your spouse or your boyfriend or girlfriend and making them carry all the heavy stuff for you while you're at the con. I kind of tricked this guy into doing it for me, so joke's on you. That's the best advice I have for today. You all can leave now. No, I'm kidding. So hot glue, it's gonna get dry really quickly. I'm pausing as it's getting dry, but you're gonna want to do this pretty quick. Just kind of line it up roughly and put it kind of roughly where you had it. This isn't going to be perfect. This is just a demo, so I'm not really worried about accuracy, like this is hanging off or whatever. It's fine. So, as you can see, I messed up. I was talking, and then I forgot what I was going to say while this was getting dry. But if this happens, no worries. What you can do is turn your heat gun on low, or use a hairdryer. So I'm going to turn this down a little. Make sure it's hot. Because we're going to turn it on low because we don't want to burn the foam, right? So if you have it on low, just kind of do that and get the hot glue hot again. And then it should stick. Just a fun little trick in case anything like that happens to you guys. Yeah. And then for the upper layer, if you, like I did before, kind of put it where you want it. You kind of want it there, or maybe you want it down here, maybe, you know, wherever. And then just take your Sharpie and draw the pattern roughly. Take that off, glue it on. You can use super glue, you can use contact cement, you can use hot glue, just whatever medium works best for you. I mean, there's pros and cons to every one. With contact cement, you're going to want to use it in a well-ventilated area because that should get you high. And not a good kind. So, with contact cement, well-ventilated area, what I mean by that is somewhere either outside on your porch, somewhere where you can put the window open and have the fan going. I personally like to do it in my garage with the door open and a fan going. Also like to wear a respirator, so this is good to have for sanding and for gluing. This is going to protect you from dirt, debris, dust, harmful fumes. I would definitely recommend investing in a respirator. If you don't have a respirator, or maybe you can't get one at the moment, a dust mask also works pretty well. And maybe an N95, something like that. Just something to protect yourself with. With super glue, it gets dry really quick. The residue kind of sticks on your fingers and it's hard to wash off. And then with hot glue, hot glue gun burns, like that sucks. So just be mindful. There's pros and cons to every one, but whatever works best for you is the best way to do it. Now, say I messed up something my cut wasn't clean enough, or something is like not level, and before I get to priming and painting, I need to get it fixed, right? So you can use a rotary tool or sanding sticks, sanding paper. There's a few different ways to sand. What I find the easiest way, or the easiest thing to do, is to use a rotary tool. This is a Wen. It looks cool and expensive and like intimidating, right? Nope, it's only 20 bucks on Amazon. I would definitely recommend investing in one. It's gonna have this attachment for you to use. I'm not gonna turn it on because we don't want to be, blowing up dust or anything like that during the presentation. But this thing is awesome for sanding. There are tutorials for how to use it on foam on YouTube. So if you ever, if you get one and you don't know how to use it, I would definitely recommend using a tutorial. But I mean, essentially you just kind of go in light-handed. You don't want to just bore into the foam like this. You're gonna mess up, right? Yeah. So you kind of want to lightly, as it's, I usually do it on a low setting, like I think 3,000 spins a minute. And then just kind of lightly go in like this. That's the best way I find. I usually go with the spin and not against the spin. But like I said, if you want more depth and more information on how to do that, I think Stephen Smith from SKS Props is the tutorial on that. Yeah, I love him. So I actually learned this method from Evil Ted. This is a really cheap method to get your foam sanded. If you don't want to spend the money on a rotary tool, or it's something you just don't want to do, right? So you can buy sanding paper pretty much anywhere in different grits. I usually start with a low grit and work my way up to a high grit. Take the sanding paper and then just take some paint sticks from Home Depot and cut out strips and glue it onto the paint sticks. It's awesome. So you start with a low grit, kind of do light passes over, and then once the bulk of it is off, it's going to kind of look like this. It's not going to look the best. So you want to work your way up with a higher grit until it's nice and smooth again. That takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of energy. I definitely recommend using a rotary tool or a Dremel instead of sanding sticks. That's just my personal preference, though. Okay. So once you know, like this is what you want it to look like, right? You're ready to move on to painting, to priming. You can go ahead and get that started. So with primers, again, there's a lot of different methods, a lot of different sources and materials out there for you to use. What works best for me, and what has always worked best for me, is Plastidip. Plastidip you can find any hardware store. I've said that a million times, I'll probably say it again. I usually get it in black just because I find that's the nicest one in my opinion. Pro tip, when you're using Plastidip on foam, before you start to spray it, dip this into like a bucket or a pitcher of hot water for about 15 minutes before you start, and it'll go on a lot smoother. Otherwise, it's kind of splotchy. Yeah, so definitely do that every time. It's going to make your final result look so much better. So this is what it looks like after a few layers of Plastidip. I usually do 3 to 4 layers with light passes. Again, I usually don't go heavy-handed with anything except, the blade and making sure that I've got enough force on the blade. But yeah, you just kind of want to do light passes with spray paint or with the Plastidip until it looks nice and even. All the Sharpie lines that you made will be covered up. You won't be able to see the color of the foam anymore. So if this was white, it would be completely black now. So again, just 3 to 4 layers of Plastidip, and then you're ready to move on to paint. I usually let the Plastidip part sit for about 24 hours so it's not tacky anymore. And then after that, you can start painting. Acrylic paint is usually what I use. You can use spray paint if you want, but most spray paints, once you start wearing the piece and moving around in it, because, oh yeah, I'm sorry, did you have a question?
Oh, cool. You may be about to answer. I was going to
Yeah.
ask if you use a primer.
Oh, I was literally about to ask that.
A primer?
Primer.
Yeah, I use, most of the time I use Plastidip as my primer. I actually wanted to show this to you guys. It's called Prime. It's from Prop Monkey Studios. You can find this on TNTCosplaySupplies.com. It's just a nice like first coat that you can put on your raw EVA foam, as it were, and it kind of covers up the pores a little better. But this is just kind of like a pre-primer. Most cosplayers will use Plastidom as the primer, and that's it. And then you can just go straight to paint. You can use any sort of paint. This is also another sort of primer. It's called Hexflex. This is made for EVA foam. It's pretty cool. You don't have to spray this. You can just paint it on. Just know that it's going to leave paint streaks. And a few times that I've used it, I've had paint streaks on my foam, which isn't the end of the world. But you know, if you want to avoid paint streaks, then I would definitely recommend using Plastidom instead. Yeah. And then, like I was saying, you can just go straight to paint. You don't need any sort of specialty acrylic primer or anything like that. You are good to go. So usually with paint, to get it from something like this to something like this, it's going to take about 3 to 4 layers. Again, you can keep adding layers until it's nice and covered, and you really can't see the black anymore. You just want it to be a solid color. Yeah, it's just usually simple acrylics is what I use. I like Apple Barrel and plaid paints. They're just any acrylic that you can find at any craft store. However, I recently started using Plaid FX paint. This is made for EVA foam. This stuff's legit. It doesn't crack as much once you start to wear the foam or the piece. And it goes on really smooth. It's kind of, it's not chalky, but you can find like a lot of paints, like white acrylic paint is really chalky and it'll kind of chalk off as you wear it. So yeah, Plaid FX paint, if you're gonna paint EVA foam, definitely recommend using this. I think you can find this at, I want to say Michael's, but I don't know if they discontinued it. I would definitely just go online and maybe just Google Plaid FX paint and see where you can buy these. I'm pretty sure I bought them on clearance from Michael's though, because they discontinued them.
It's Blick's art store, and Sandflax may have that product.
Ooh, good to know. Yeah, so, okay, once you have your base coat on, what's really gonna make your foam pop is dimension, depth, shadows, highlights, things like that. So I went ahead and pre-mixed just some different variations of brown. And I really wish I had my sponge brush to dab on. But for leather, it's usually not just a one-dimensional color. It's got some depth. And I like to put depth just onto my foam just to give it some life. Because this kind of looks a little dull, a little boring. So I usually have a sponge brush, like a round sponge that I use to dab on the paint. I forgot it though, I thought I packed everything, I surely didn't. I usually will do just variations of brown, light brown, dark brown. If you mix brown and orange, you kind of get like a rich, warm brown, and that's what we'll start with. I'm just gonna use a paper towel to dab it on. And I usually just dab on like that. It might take you a few times, but with a sponge brush, you usually only have to do it once. But just something like that for, for a leather look, which is what I'm going for. Now, if you wanted to do shadows for like armor piece that looks like metal, just take, I think Plaid FX, yeah, they have the silver. You can just darken it up a little, and then just kind of paint your corners darker, and that's going to make it pop. So just a cool little note there, but yeah, really, just play with it, especially if like you're not trying to get a costume done that's a character, right? So if you're making something for like LARPing or like Ren Fair, which is in town right now, just have a Bob Ross moment and play with it and see what you can do. You can see I'm just taking a lighter color and blotting it. So, and then we'll paint some happier dreams. But honestly, just have fun with it. If you find that you do this and you freaking hate it, be like, this is the worst, like I did. You know, just give it a break and come back to it. Don't make yourself do anything that you're not going to do. I like this because it's fun. Yeah. Mhm. Yep. Oh yeah, I'm so sorry. Yes, so Plastidip is a spray. So we spray that on. And then with acrylic, I just use a paintbrush. You can use an airbrush. I don't have a lot of experience with airbrushes, but that's how you can completely avoid paint streaks. But yeah, I just use just a paintbrush. And anytime you use a paintbrush, you're probably gonna have brush streaks, and that's okay. It's not the end of the world. But you just don't want heavy brush streaks. Exactly. By the way, like I said, in the spirit of having fun with it, if you're ever painting or cutting and you mess up, guess what? It's battle damage. Like if I cut and my blade accidentally slips and it does that, oops, battle damage. So, I mean, you can find a lot of creative ways to cover up your mistakes or your sins. Yeah, don't look, there's a such thing called a 5-foot rule, like don't look too closely at cosplayer stuff, because from 5 feet away it looks good, but you know, from up close you might start finding those mistakes. So, yeah, so as you can see with the lighter brown that I went through, now it's starting to pop, now it's starting to look like leather. And usually what I would do, we're kind of running out of time here, but what I would do is go in with a darker brown and blot it on until I get something that I like. I do have finished pieces, not of this exact bracer, but I've finished leather stuff that I've done. Down at my booth, I'm at booth 127 in the cosplay section. I think you can see from right down there, but I've got finished costumes. If you guys have any additional questions, please come see me. I'm so happy to help. This is my first solo panel, by the way. I've never done a panel by myself. I was so nervous, but you guys are a wonderful crowd. I really, really appreciate you coming. Before I let you guys go, were there any additional questions? Yeah.
So one of the things I do on my props, I usually use something like a fixative, like Krylon, but I realized Krylon kind of darkens my paint.
Yeah.
Is there a better fixative than using Krylon? That doesn't darken your colors?
Are you talking about like a finishing spray?
Mm-hmm. To seal it up.
Yeah, I think this is Krylon. There's, yeah, I know.
I guess I use polyurethane.
Sorry, that is something I meant to say. Once you're done and this is completely dry, go ahead and take a nice clear spray paint and just kind of do one good layer of spray paint just to ensure that your paint doesn't chip as you're wearing it. It's just going to be a nice final sealer. So apparently this one is crap. Don't use this one. To be honest with you, I really don't use sealers for my stuff, just because I'm gonna do the minimum amount of work as possible. Like, if I can skip steps, I'm going to skip them. But don't do as I say, not as I do. Oh, actually, one of my friends had mentioned, Josh, he's down in the cosplay section of Whiskey Weasel Cosplay. He's in the booth next to me, so if you have any questions. Flat FX has a clear primer. It's, you can put it in an airbrush and brush it, spray it that way, or you can just paint it on. So I would definitely give that one a try. I haven't tried it myself, but it is clear. It's going to be a nice final sealer. And what's cool about Flat FX is that they made their paint special to be able to bend. So I'm pretty sure that primer will bend with the piece as you're wearing it. So you should be good to go. By the way, if that ever happens and you mess up and you bend your piece, you can take a heat gun on low, make sure it's hot, and kind of lightly pass, and it'll heal the foam. By the way, a pro tip, and it should kind of look back like how it was before. Yeah, so I'll let you guys go. It's a little bit past 5, but if you have any questions, I'll be here for a few minutes, kind of packing up. I'm happy to help. I hope you guys learned a lot. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Oh.
Hey. Oh, that's sick.
This is my first time ever doing it. So, just need to like long-term success.
Honestly, taking my time. Because you're gonna miss it, right? You start out with something and you're not gonna be perfect at it, right? So you want to keep trying, right? So take your time with things. Try not to do things enough before they come on, and give yourself grace. I know. Girl, trust me. I mean, I was literally painting this right before the panel. So I got it. I understand.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
So, I made like just circular islands. What if like I want to make a sense of shit like this where it's like funny? How would I go about that?
So I would just say trial and error. Most of the time, if there's something specific like a cross pyramid or something like that, you can find people that have them. If you can't for some reason, I would say sketch out what you want on paper, and then put it to foam. And if it doesn't work, you kind of know what went wrong. Modify and work on that. Also, if you have any issues with stuff like that, I'm hashtag Cosplay on Instagram and Facebook. Feel free to send me a message and I can try to troubleshoot with you.
Because the live stream you put is also going to be saved, right? So I have access to that.
Yes. Hey, Jeff, will you turn off the live stream and try to save it?
I
don't
will
know
bring.
if it'll save, but we can try.
I will bring you the phone.
That is a good point.
I don't
Thank you.
know how to Instagram.